it is not the amount of conflict you have. That's not a red flag in and of itself from what I've seen. It is your ability to repair in a way that's meaningful, that you still stay connected and feel respectful to your partner. A healthy child is, really thriving when they have a parent who is living authentically, living openly, and is genuinely happy. Because when a parent is happy, it naturally flows down to their child.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this week on Once Upon a Feeling. I have a very, very special guest. I'm so excited to get into this. Our guest this week is Dr. Sheena Glover. Dr. Sheena Glover is a clinical psychologist practicing out of Fort Worth, Texas. She is the founder and owner of Intimacy in Progress. That is her practice, where she supports the needs of the LGBTQ plus community, working in various relationship structures, including polyamory and consensual non-monogamy. Hi, Dr. Sheena. Thank you so much for coming on. I am so excited about what we're going to talk about.
I am excited to be here, Rita. Thank you for having me.
Relationships. It's kind of interesting because Once Upon a Feeling has always been about parenting and what we do with the kids. Now, I grew up in Asia, and as I do more of this work and as I look at my children and train them and kind of like trying to guide them through their growth and just all the things, I realize that it has to do a lot. It has a lot to do with how I was brought up. Like, how a lot of times I feel like I'm almost like reparenting myself. Like I have to do that first before I can actually show up for my kids the way that I want to. The other day, I was doom scrolling in my Instagram, which I'm really trying really hard to cut down. And I saw this post and that really resonated. And it basically said, conflict is not the opposite of intimacy. It's not what causes the intimacy to go away. On the contrary, is actually the opportunity for you to become more intimate with your partner. And it got me thinking, because that is not how I experienced it when I was growing up. My parents fought a lot. They're still kind of not great on speaking terms, but I'm in my late 40s, so I can manage that. What I watched growing up definitely did not build intimacy, either between the two of them or within our family altogether. Let's start the conversation with conflict. And this is the very traditional monogamous relationship. It just involves two people, a man and a woman. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know when we were talking, prepping for the episode, you mentioned some of the things that you experienced growing up. How does conflict between parents affect children and family dynamics and things like that? And if they are parents who are just can seem to get past that conflict and the fighting and things like that, like what are some of the just quick things that they can do before they figure it all out, if we ever figure it all out?
Well, so one of the things that marks a healthy relationship, because I specialize in couples work. So it is not the amount of conflict you have. That's not a red flag in and of itself from what I've seen. It is your ability to repair in a way that's meaningful, that you still stay connected and feel respectful to your partner. So if we're to model that in front of our children, in the way of what do they take on? So every human being has their own nervous system. And that child, however, their nervous system gets activated by seeing their parents have conflict. And really, you also have to remember like the degree of conflict. There is very seething conflict that no one's raising their voice, but you can cut the tension with a knife. And then there is like plates being thrown, and all of that has the ability to activate a different response in the child,
Hmm.
right? And the child internalizes that, and how they cope is based on what they seek out from early on from their parents, like they go to mom or dad to try to stop them from like, mom, like look at this toy. They try to use distraction, and when there isn't comfort, that's some of the kind of the lasting impact for them, meaning they could internalize that and embody a lot of the same behaviors as their parents' conflict, or they could be the complete opposite. So it's, dare I say, it's always going to be a mystery
Hmm.
for that child, whatever they're going to go to reach for when they're in conflict. But if I were to like zero in on parents, because that's what I do, the couples that I often see, whether they be a part of the LGBTQ or not, they're parents too. There's a lot of them that are, and a lot of the times the conflicts when it's had, it has a lot of emotions, and a lot of people don't say their emotions, they act out their
Mm.
emotions, which can get really toxic and heavy, and it goes every which way. And so a lot of the times I teach couples who are having conflicts, like what is actually going on in your
Mm.
body. Come back. Come back home. And I always reference the body as home to a lot of my couple. Like come back home and see what's on fire. What room in your house, emotional room in your house, is on fire and need your attention? And are you communicating that to your partner? Are you communicating the emotion, or are you doing everything that you can to inflict that emotion onto your partner? Because I see that often too. So conflict, it happens so fast. That's why I call it a fire, because you first see smoke,
And
and
then
then
explodes.
it's a ray.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And even that seething one, the where it's really like quiet, it's not yelling, but you could feel the tension. You can feel like everybody, go for cover, and no one is throwing a plate. Sometimes that's even scarier than the one that is
Yeah.
like out and about. Yeah. So that's where my mind goes when I think of that question of what is the first thing that I teach couples when they're having a conflict. What's going on with you? Because to know you is to then be able to find a way onto that bridge with your partner. Without that, you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping your partner says the right thing to disarm you, which is a feeling really powerless in those
It
moments.
is so interesting you say that because I'm trying to think about like how I grew up and, it's been a few decades and I have also seen other parents that became parents before I did. So they're almost like there's this arc where 40 some years ago, how I grew up is that the parents really acted out when they were angry. There were conflicts. There was shouting. There's no physical fight, thank God, but there was shouting. There was, words that was said that probably wasn't the nicest thing to say in front of a child. Or, dad will then go and sleep in the office and, not come home, that type of a thing. And then I remember probably about 20 years ago, some of my colleagues, they kind of went completely the other way. I have seen parents where they just vowed not to fight in front of their children ever. Right? So everything happens after bedtime. Everything happens behind closed doors, which now, like looking back, knowing what I know, probably isn't the best either. And the next thing you know, boom, sorry, parents are filing for divorce. And the kids is like, wait, what happened? So that is also interesting. But what you're telling me right now in terms of coming home, that's basically what we teach our children. Is like, when they're having an emotional breakdown, it's like, okay, where do you feel it in your body? What is going on? Like, tell me, or my chest is tight, my stomach's hurting, or whatever it is. And then communicating that. Um, it is wild.
You know, one thing that I was thinking of, like when you said that, about the ones that are really quiet and then, or have conflict quietly at night, and then the next day, mom and dad is getting a divorce. I think that there's a beautiful art form to being able to disagree with someone and hold the line of, I disagree with you. I don't maybe even like what you're saying, but I'm going to hold the line because I love you and I care about you and I want to hear you. That is the conflict, right? The moment you enter a space with someone and you disagree on something, directions or opinions, and you're in technically a state of conflict because it's the opposite of maybe the state or perspective that you're in. And so you're on a level that's being modeled, it's that piece of, I'm showing you that I can hold the differences of you without dominating, without dismissing, or making it about me. And it's not labeled, right? It's not labeled for the child like, hey, this is what we're doing, but it's like, oh, I see mom and dad disagree and they respect each other enough to hold it. This actually is a really good opportunity for the child down the road. It's like, when they practice conflict with parents,
Mm.
like, I disagree with mom
Mm.
and dad, I know that I'm going to be held. They're going to hold a space for me to be able to disagree without it being like, it's all about what I think you should be doing.
I love that you throw in there because now it comes to the question is about the need for all of us. For some hot reason, we all want to be right. This notion like I need to be right and you need to think like I do, or I throw it. Why is that? Why drives that? Like from your experience, I don't know whether there was a clinical way to describe it. This need to be, and this is on so many levels, right? This is probably on couples, between the parent and the child. I mean, heck, like the political landscape nowadays is like, oh no, I'm right, I'm not. But that's the thing, like so many things can be right just for different people. But why are we so driven, especially with those who are closest to us? Like, why do we all need to convince other people that our way is the right way and the only way?
I think so. Both professionally and personally, this is a question that burns me. It burns me in my personal. I'm like, why is it that when my sister don't agree with me, I am just appalled, and we need to stop everything until this is right. Sometimes I've had to process that, and then even in when I see in couples. So I was digging into that, and I've discovered the word is misattunement. There is something, I think, dare I say, survivalistic in that word, because when you're not attuned in your relationship, romantic relationship, it is probably the most, when it's done chronically or experienced chronically, you probably feel the most alone. It's so isolating, it's so alone. And so when you don't see me, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with the knowledge that you don't see me right now. That you either, is it because you don't want to, or is it because you can't? But it's that loneliness. I think that we don't want to sit with the discomfort of not being seen and not being understood, and we are trying to control something outside of us. If I can say the right words, if I can get you to see it, then you can join me and I won't be so feeling X, Y, and Z. So I think that is like a major component to it. And dare I say, like couples, people with backgrounds, maybe from trauma also, they're maybe more heightened to it. I'm not going to say that they're overly sensitive, because I don't think that I think people are just emotionally, they feel more deeply. But I think that, because a misattunement in a child, like, I don't know if you've ever come across that video. It's called the still face
I think
experiment.
so.
It's, yeah, where the baby is,
Mm-hmm.
a mom
Yeah.
and baby is
Mm-hmm.
interacting, and the baby is doing everything that they can to get mom's
Yeah.
attention, right? So on a biological level, it's survival. I look to my parent to be able to so that I can attune to, and they attune back to me to tell me that this is safe. And I wonder how much of that gets carried into our adulthood, and we don't think about it. We don't name it that way. So when we are met with like that uncertainty, or someone saying, I don't get you, you're wrong. Oh my goodness, how dare you?
Yeah.
It's visceral, What do you think?
It's what is interesting is that there is one thing to not attune to each other or agree with each other's thoughts or decisions or whatever, but we equate that as the only way to bond. It's like, do you know what I mean? Like, the bond is not based on whether we agree on everything or not. Like, we bond when we bond. You're my friend, I'm your friend. We probably have two very separate religions or whatever. We believe in different things. We eat different food. But I don't think this is kind of the interesting thing where, like, we immediately think that, oh, because you don't agree with me, therefore you're not on my team. Or, oh, we are losing connection. Somehow it's a disconnection. And I wonder if this explains why the world is the way it is right now.
Because it's threatening, because that's what you're speaking to if you think about it. Like, you're not on my team, meaning that you felt safe, you and I were aligned, and then you not being on the same team with me is on, dare I say, it brings up our fear response. It brings up this threat detection. And so, like, in romantic relationships or parenting relationships, like, if we're not on the same team, I can maybe excuse it the first time or the second time, but when it starts building up, then we feel like we're on the other side of the aisle. And then I don't know how to reach you, like you said, and going back to that disconnection.
Well, then I think then the key to all of this is that how do you disagree and still keep the connection? How do we reassure each other saying, like, I still see you, even though we don't believe in the same thing? How do we, if that threat and if that armor all of a sudden comes out because we share some sort of differences in political view, and that happens everywhere, here, Asia, Middle East, wherever. Like, what are the things that we can do or we should do, the words that we say to say, hey, we don't have to believe in the same thing. I still think you're a wonderful person. And this also goes to some of the things that, as a founder, you're a founder, is how we put everybody in a box. It's like, oh, you live in California, you're this and that, therefore you must believe X, Y, and Z. It's almost formulaic, right? But we all know we're human beings, we're complex. We come from different places. We have different upbringings. We read different books, listening to different podcasts, as we were just discussing. They could be many different things. It could be paradoxical. It could be, none of it have to make sense. So I wonder, and I think this is actually, what a great segue to kind of talk about this non-traditional love. And I'm sure when I first introduce you as as somebody who works in non-traditional relationships, on the other side of those radios, people will be like, what are we getting ourselves into? Like, do I need to pull my kids away? There are just so many different ways of doing things. And so much of what we're willing to look at, for the lack of a better word, I don't want to say tolerate, but to accept and really, like, expanding our horizon on and increase our capacity. So much it actually has to do with, like, what our nervous system can handle. But I feel like I kind of want you, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I feel like once we can disarm people, it's like, this is not a threat. This is just different people presenting different facets of themselves. And we can all, like, just because your friend is polyamorous or, your teenager is exploring that particular type of relationship, doesn't mean you have to be. Like, there is no right or wrong. And I think it's just this interesting piece where like it's right, it's wrong. Like, how do we get people to kind of flow more of the in between? Like there is no right or wrong. It's just different. And I would love for you to kind of talk about like how did you even get into working in this capacity? What is it like for you? Because I can only imagine that is a daily conversation in your practice. Like you don't see those words like, splattered in front of the front page of New York Times.
So I got into the work because of a client of mine that I had for years in individual counseling. I had my own individual practice, and uh, just to be able to support her was to get immersed in this world, just so that I could support her in her journey. And then it opened the door for me to see a lot of some of the same ingredients that you see, the stigma and the prejudice that you see around the LGBTQ population. You also see it in the non-traditional, non-structured relationship or non-heteronormative relationships. And if it doesn't fit that mold, then it must be wrong. And I'm a Black and Korean psychologist. I'm a woman. I go towards the thing that is quote unquote bad for you because of narrow mindedness. Uh, and it makes me roll my eyes whenever I see that. So this area is so stigmatized, but when you go into the world of learning about these relationship structures, consensual non-monogamy or polyamory, they do some of the most amazing work that most heteronormative couples would maybe benefit so much from, because this relationship structure requires so much communication, so much self-awareness, self-reflection, understanding your boundaries, communicating your boundaries, being willing to work with a complete stranger and build relationships simply because you love your partner, and facilitating the kind of structure that creates harmony. And then if there are kids involved, like how does this relationship structure support the child and in the best way possible? Does all members need to be a part of this child's life? The parents get to decide that. So there's such a beautiful, workup, if you will, development of skills, and truly like constantly editing and learning, editing, implementing within this relationship, that a lot of heteronormative couples, they wait maybe until a crisis happens and come to couples therapy, and that's when they learn it. So, you and I have spoken before, kids are exposed to whatever their parents give them. And I think when they are exposed to a polyamory relationship, one of the things, just like when a child is, raised by same-sex parents, because they're exposed to it, they are just open to knowing that this type of sexuality is there or relationship structure is there. It's just knowledge. It is not an influential in the sense of like, oh, now my child is going to be polyamory. No, I think to a lot of kids, even though the research is it's smaller, groups, and it's still very fresh. A lot of the research is coming out that kids are able to see these type of relationship structure and know if this is what they want, what they don't want. So if they want to be in a monogamous relationship, they'll know it, or they're more sure about it because they've had models. But my goodness, they will have such a depth in like emotional vocabulary and being able to talk about the difficult things that a lot of kids maybe that aren't exposed to that level of emotionally mature conversations, will be reluctant to have with their parents. Nope, in this family structure, they're it's modeled. So I think I hope hopefully I answered the question of how I got there. But man, we can learn so much from this type of relationship structure, because it is not a fix it. It is not easy. It requires a lot of work to be in a polyamory relationship. And I think that that's the misleading thing that is out in society. That is just, oh, a bunch of people just wants to have sex with variety of people and that's it. No, it's not. It means that I want depth and richness in the relationship that I find that resonates with me, and can I find other like-minded people to build this beautiful
That is
relationship.
so interesting because I think before I have to look it up, there was a book, or I heard this on a podcast, and it was a book that talks about soulmates and what we think about soulmates. And basically, what it says is that the notion of a soulmate, where like this particular one person has to do everything with you, is a lot. It's like, they have to like the same food, you know, like to do the same thing, read the same type of books, listen to the same type of music, and all the different things. Like, that's a lot on one person. And the way that we have been conditioned, whether it's Hollywood or Jane Austen, I don't know, from as long as we know, is that there's this one person out there for you. But what if there isn't? What if you actually spread it out? Not necessarily in a relationship like a polyamory or whatnot, but even just as friendship, right? Where like, I do this with that person, I do this with that person, and I will go eat with this other person. Um, it is a lot easier to live life when you have a cohort. We have many soulmates on doing different things rather than just hang all your hopes and dreams on one single soul. Uh, I wonder what is, this is interesting because I see that also in children. Um, my two girls, they are very different in the sense that one floats. She will do different things with different people. And the other one has like, I have my best friend. Now she's kind of like, she's younger. So she's like, I don't know. She's kind of getting on my nerve or whatever it is. I kind of want to float. But it is just so interesting how this lateral adult relationship is also just reflected in how children approach friendship. When you are counseling a couple who clearly are not the one and all for the other person, how do you guide them through that process in the relationship, either branching out or, I don't know, stepping back, whichever kind of a modification? Because I think that is what a beautiful way to model for your children that sometimes it's not one friend, sometimes it's many friends.
Okay, so I do have, heterosexual couples, and when I get them, um, I typically see that the woman is typically plugged into a community. She has a resource of emotional depth and closeness with a variety of people, from family members to best friends. And then when I look under the hood of especially the man's experience, I often see that it is crickets. Maybe they have a friend at work that they speak to on a daily basis, but when you actually peel back the onion of what do you guys talk about, it's really it lacks that kind of the emotional vulnerability or depth. And it just makes me think about like how our society kind of wires us, like women, because we're relegated to be the caretakers. There's pros and cons to that. It also means that we are afforded and allowed to have depth in our relationship. We can go there with a variety of people, and then men are not inherently afforded that privilege when in our society, because the providers, that's what they're supposed to be, and that's it. So I think of that. So anyway, so when I think about that and I see that kind of structure, that background experience coming in to the relationship, I often see that the woman in these heteronormative relationships being the most taxed, because they are truly, in some ways, everything for their partner, because they carry all of the emotional kind of baggage of their partner, their male, their husbands, their boyfriend. And because the boyfriend has just been conditioned to only give themselves to that. So I think of the modern version of your soulmate being when I see, that being a component. But generally, when I see a couple enmeshed, where there's an expectation, you have to be everything for me, or this is not going to work. I immediately challenge that. I'm like, where is that going? What's happening there? Because that is actually putting a lot of pressure into the relationship that's really unnecessary. So I think that it's kind of like, if we're not doing it the way that we were taught in society, the media, the Disney movies, it must be wrong. I think that that becomes smoke for them, like, oh, this is sending alarm bells. No, your person cannot be everything for you, and vice versa. You're designed to have community. You're designed to fit with people that resonates with you in that, because we are all parts. And if, like, one of the things I incorporate in my couples work is this thing called parts work. And there are parts of ourselves that we show up that, ruled by our emotional state, and we allow those parts to be seen by certain people, or sometimes we only show certain parts to people. So I incorporate that into my work with couples. And when you have, more softer side, maybe you want to show that to your partner, and giggly side, but then maybe you want your feistiness to be with your sister. And what it does is it gives us allowance to express these parts of ourselves in these relationships. And so how do I get them started? Is who is the closest person you think is a good friend, someone love, and trust, that you can start just sharing, just spending time with, and bringing them a part of your life. And I mean, I can go on and on, but the next step is vulnerability. If you're not used to it, you're going to have to get used to being vulnerable, opening yourself up. But I purposely have couples reach out to someone that they feel is a safe person outside of their partners, and start, sharing small things with them, not about their relationship, but maybe other topics that they can get close on. And the goal is to expand, little by little. I mean, I can go on,
That
but
is
I'm
that
going to
is so
pause right
interesting
there.
because, like, I think like the podcast now we're talking is really taking on this thing where whatever that we're willing to see in ourselves, like, we all have filters. We project, we do things based on whatever filters that we have on. And so if there is a certain part of you that you aren't, even yourself are like unwilling to see, chances are you ain't got to let your child see that, right? You're not going to teach them that. You're not going to talk about it. Uh, and so, like, what you're saying just now is like, oh, like, all the parents out there, like all of us, like, we have to be able to see each part, all the parts, us as a whole, without judgment, and then just kind of like observing it. Um, and I want to say, even like, sometimes allow your child to see those parts of you. Um, so much of this parenting work is like, for me, sometimes it's triggering because I'm like, it's a mirror, like my kids are showing me some of the
Oh my
things that
gosh.
I'm like, dang it, that's me. I can see myself in that. I don't like it. Um, and then, and then it goes to the like, do as I say and not what as I do. It's just the whole can of worm. Um, but yeah, I think that's like really the real work, is that having that mirrored back and looking at yourself and loving yourself anyways, knowing that you're a complex being. Um, we have, I don't know how many, I mean, I remember the Atlas of Heart by Brene Brown, like,
Mm.
just in terms of the emotion, it is wild. Like, it's crazy. I don't even know how many of them were there. It was an atlas for sure. And all of that is acceptable. That color wheel makes who you are. That's why you're you, and that's why each each one of us are so different. We express everything differently.
You know, one thing I like what you said about the mirror is like, I remember when I started, as part of like my graduate work, I had to go and I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
therapy because, you know, my supervisor once said, you know, Sheena, you can only go as far, or you can only take your clients as far as you've taken yourself. So I was like, okay, sign me up for therapy.
Okay.
Man, was that a wake up call. I thought I was good. And then my therapist, Molly, I adore her, but she was like, oh, are you sure? Got some things to work on. So one of the things that I remember doing was like, you know, I wanted to work through a lot of the pains of my own
Mm-hmm.
childhood. And you know, there was this knowledge that if I ever had children, I wanted to make sure I was ready. And I remember her, like, she indulged me. She did a great job. I love her so much. But she was like, you know, Sheena, there is going to come a time where when you are a mom, that's when the work starts. You know, I mean, it would be great because we intellectualize very easily. It's very easy, at least for me, to fall into intellectualizing, but I can intellectualize my all these hypotheticals and what I'm going to do and work on. But it really isn't until you're in front of that child. They are but most clearest mirror you've ever saw. Looking at and I'm like, who is this person? And you're like, gosh, I have to now
Yeah.
do work. Like that's the crappy moment of but also a beautiful
Yeah.
moment at the same time. You're like, oh, another thing that I have to
Yeah.
work on. And I think that that's also like I make sure like when I have couples, when I work with couples and they have, you know, kids, there are moments where that stuff comes up for them and it's like it's time to look at this. It's time to see how how your kid is asking you of something different than what you're used to. And so
Mhm.
I wish we could all do the work before the kids come, and we should. There it needs to be some work done, but man, it's you always get nice little sneaky ones that come in. Have you
Oh
had
my
those
God.
experiences with your
I'm
daughters?
12, almost 12 years in. I'm still doing it. Like, like it's like, okay, like this is what I need to learn. I think one of the things that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned about is this, you know, having a relationship, being in a relationship with another human being, and in some of the cases of your clients, multiple other human beings is hard enough. Throw a kid or two in there makes things exponentially harder, right? So now you have got all these things coming at you. Uh, what does one do?
Ooh, here's
Other
my
than therapy, but well, and in addition to
okay.
therapy, like what is how yeah, like can we throw some breadcrumbs for people to like kind of
Yes.
like how do we get through this? Yeah.
Okay. The very first thing is do not threaten divorce, break up. Keep your one of the things. So the first thing I do is when I see a couple, I specifically ask them, have there been any conversations about divorce, breakups, or anything like that? And some will say yes, and I'm say, okay, you need to make a commitment for 6 months to not even utter that word because what it does is it creates a hostage situation in the relationship. The other person feels pressure, they have to get everything right. So, commitment, no decision is made. We are just in it to see, you know, how it works. So, when I think about bringing that baby into this world and the chaos that is about to ensue, as well as the sleep
Oh yeah.
deprivation, try not to break up the first year or two of having a new baby. But the thing that both people have to be intentional about, the two areas, is romance and sex. Safe sex, meaning we're not trying to have sex, you know, a week after the baby's born. No, that's unsafe sex. But I do believe that a lot changes for the body, for the mind, and romance, the desire to just love on your partner and want to spend quality time gets flooded with your child and responsibility and work. And what keeps a parent, but also the relationship is the intimacy, and sex is a part of it. You can't let those two things go, the intimacy and sex. Because if you're not keeping a temperature gauge on that, the thing that brings this whole family together is slowly starting to erode and slowly starting to fracture. And it was just the two of you first, and you have to be intentional of how do we make sure that we spend time together and nurturing the parts of us that is still me and you, not mom and dad, not career worker, but just the thing that made us us. So if you haven't had a date and you haven't had sex, it's time to reassess. It's time to like take a look. Why? What's getting in the way? And the last thing is that externalize the problem. Meaning, I think couples inevitably there's a default parent, and I think it takes a lot of effort not to get into a default parent role. But it happens. It's okay. So, for example, breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you are the lifeline, and so you have when the baby wakes up, even if the partner is here, you go, you still have to take care of they can't breastfeed. So sometimes that process becomes the default, the way that your baby responds to being held. They want to be comforted typically by the mother. And so what it does is that over time, the other parent is just becomes the supportive figure and not the vital default parent either. So when that happens, and I say when because it's going to happen, to some degree, blame the system and not the other partner. Meaning, how do we change the system? How can we fault the system for bringing us here instead of it's you, John, it's you, Tiffany, that brought me here, or why we're at odds? It's what are we doing together within this system, and the system isn't working for us. How do we change that instead of blaming? So I gave three little immediate take a look at those three things, and you'll definitely start finding a lot of things not working when you look at those three.
And I'm just so great because, like, no, for all the people who are kind of like bystanders watching their friends, getting married and have babies, sign up for those babysitting nights so your friends can go out on a date, and reconnect and not worry about things. This is one of those things. And, once upon a feeling, the village, the community, it's like, we somehow went so nuclear in terms of like nuclear family structure that we lost so much of the other things that came with having a village or even a multi-generational home where, the grandparents can watch the kids so you have some time. And now, like, how do we rebuild that back? Instead of, not everybody can afford a nanny, not everybody can afford, but if we all kind of get together and watch each other's kids and, so the parent can have a couple hours alone, everybody's happier. So many things.
I agree. It's definitely hard, being new parents, the relationship gets really stressed. I mean, I got a new puppy 4 years ago, and I was sleep deprived for a week, and I had never regretted my decision in my life. I love her. I was so mixed, and that's I just think about what sleep deprivation is, and that was my most recent experience of it, and it's not fun. And imagine doing that for months to a year or more, and the person that you made this baby with is right next to you. Oh man, they're gonna get all your smoke, and vice versa. You don't need to fill it with mommy duties and things like that. Like, okay, if your baby is taking a nap, it's time for you and your partner to cuddle up, to love on each other, just to stay. Something so simple as when we greet each other in the mornings or in the evenings, kissing each other. Like actually hold, and just like, can I hold you for like 5 minutes? And the nervous system, what changes as parents and romantic partners is that just holding each other just regulates the nervous system. You sometimes don't even need to
Mm-hmm.
speak because it's just being able to cuddle up or kiss or touch or holding hands. Like that's something that I um, have a lot of couples do, especially when there's high conflict. Is like we need to put bookends. I'm gonna greet you during or at the beginning of the day, and at the greet you at the end of the night with a hug, with a touch, with 5 minutes. And yes, it is possible to find 5 minutes even in the chaos, even if you have to wake up 5 minutes early just to hold on to each other. I think it's those small moments that creates intimacy. Like I could just sigh and relax into your just this embrace, and that's enough to carry us through the very difficult and stressful moments, you know.
Now, now we're talking about villages and things like that and how to support each other and whatnot. I have a question on how do we support couples or not couples, people who are in polyamorous relationships? Like what are the do's and the don'ts and things like that? Because I'm trying to think. Like I actually think in my universe, that is the situation. They're not really open about it. I know they are. I don't know if they know that I know that they are, but um, just from my own education. But as someone who is just learning about things like this, how do I show up for them? And how do I show up for their children? And how do I teach my children talk about, or just be in that environment? How do we show up as the best villager that we can be, in support of their life decisions and this community, this beautiful community they have created?
Okay, so how do we show up for polyamory couples? So one of the things.
Or anybody who is like completely non-traditional, whatever they may be, whatever
Gotcha.
they may
I
be.
think the best way that we could ever show up for this type of relationship or any relationship is with openness and curiosity. You are going to be hardwired with preconceived notions because of what you consume in terms of
Mm-hmm.
media, what you heard in front of other people, or there's might be just even an absence of knowledge about this world. And if you allow yourself to just ask questions, like you do a really beautiful job, Rita, of like just asking very open-ended questions throughout this whole episode. Like you've just been so wonderful with that. And truly, what it does is it feels really disarming to be able to just be met with, I want to know you. I want to know where you're at. And can I do you need support? Do you not? And if so, this is what I offer. And is this enough for you in this season of your life? And so when I think about, non-traditional and traditional relationships, if we can just show up with curiosity, because one of the things that I find very interesting is like if parenting in and of itself has no manual and you're just doing it off the cuff, you're bound to make mistakes, right? But also like romantic relationship, you're doing it off the cuff and making so many mistakes. But we are very closeted around romantic relationship, and some people are very closeted about their parenting relationship, but not really, because their child is their evidence. They run around telling our business because if they are neglected, they will show it. If they're well nurtured, loved, you see it, right? But our romantic relationship, some people just they keep it hidden. And so I think that when we can be curious, they can ask for help and perspective. Like, hey, uh, Brittany and I, or Tim and I, we got into an argument, and I think we want to sometimes we be so supportive that we become judgmental. And when we open the door, or when our friends or family members starts telling us about conflict, telling us about struggles that are in the relationship, that whole thing that you were talking about earlier about like one person's right and the other person's wrong, that actually shuts down the conversation. Now you're painting my partner in a negative light. like one of the things that I practice just in my own personal life is like when I call my friends, and I happen to have a best friend who also happens to be a psychologist too. Oh, man, I'm like, are you even my friend? Because it seems like you're my partner's friend because she is always telling me different perspective. But I actually go in, I'm like, okay, here's the situation. Here's where I know it's my stuff. But also, I am ready to hear things that can expand my
Mm-hmm.
perspective because I know I'm not all right about this. So I think that if we can create that through that curiosity, and we limit the judgment, and if our friends is willing to share
Mm-hmm.
or our family is willing to share this type of relationship, we then can listen and figure out what they need and ask them if, hey, can I be this part? Can I support you in that way? And then also be ready to cut out people that are very toxic, because when we talk about non-traditional relationships, when we talk about the LGBTQ population, you don't need to go and harm yourself trying to keep someone in your life who's just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely just refusing to see
Yeah.
you, to understand you. And all that does is that it causes this like placating to the other person if they are not willing. Now, I'm not in the business of saying cut everybody out just because they said no or they disagreed. There is going to be hardship in the transition, but make that judgment call. Get a therapist if you need more support. But and unfortunately, within like the polyamory community and the non-consensual world, it is so taboo. So it is also very closed in the sense that you really they're I really find them to be this particular community to be just incredibly courageous because they live authentically to themselves with their village, and because it's there's networks, right? There's support systems already in place, resources, books like Polysecure is a great one. More Than Two is another book that explores that, so they can start there and find different communities. And so I'm glad that they have that. But if you don't happen to be a part of that community, I mean, just start with curiosity, be as open as possible. And when you show up without judgment, man, you learn so much.
This is part of what, and this question I feel like um, needs to be asked is that when there are people out there who is just kind of like exploring that, and they have kids, how do they make that transition? How do they involve their children? Like if you're talking about 2, 3-year-old, that's easy. They have no preconceived notion about what a relation should be. But what if they're like 9 and 10, right? They already have an idea about what it should be. There is the dad and the mom, and all of a sudden, their family structure is changing from a very traditional monogamous parents to maybe polyamory, or maybe, there is a mix between polyamory and LGBTQ. I am almost certain like this is probably also where a lot of people in our generation will kind of just stop because I mean, honestly, if I'm not in that
Mhm.
situation, but if I were, I'm like, I wouldn't know how to explain this to my child,
Mhm.
who is like going into puberty. Like, how would they navigate that water? Because it's very murky. Not only within themselves, they themselves don't know what the heck is going on. They're trying to feel it out. And then yet they have to take these children. And, if we're talking about living authentically, I don't want that to be the reason why they're like, no, we're not going to do this. We're just going to stay in this monogamous relationship, even though we're not happy, because we don't want to mess it up for them. And that's the thing that I heard so much, where parents will say, like, yes, we have decided to be the most unhappy person on earth, have a very unhappy marriage because we don't want to mess it up for you. And no kids want that kind of a
Mhm.
burden. So, for all the listeners out there, wherever you are, if you are, you know, thinking about going into polyamory, relationships, and you have children, Dr. Sheena, what are the best way to move that way so that everybody is able to live authentically?
All right. So the first thing is that the us kids these days are probably the most open that my generation and generations before that, because of exposure, right? So your kids will take your lead. So I'm going to be very careful in answering this question, not because I don't think it's a great question. I think it's individually marked for each relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I want to be very respectful that if this is not something that you want to do in a particular in this way, I don't want to
Sure.
subscribe. I don't want you to subscribe to it. But I think that because there's a lot of communication involved, meaning that we'll say the two primary partners are together. They are asking questions. They're thinking about opening up the relationship. Those two need to
Mm-hmm.
decide how the kids follow. And if you have had all these conversations and you have not thought about what kind of experiences do we want our children to be exposed in, and what do we meaning there are within the polyamory world, there is just definitely different styles within it. There is some where the polycules are, your partner's partner. Do you have a relationship with your partner's partner, or do you have as limited relationship or limited contact with them? All of that gets decided before you act. So I think that that's one thing that I want to make very clear with any listeners who wants to go into exploring this. First, is your relationship, is it healthy?
Mm-hmm.
And AKA, or saying that in another way, polyamory is not a fix to what's broken.
Mm-hmm.
It will, in fact, exasperate what's already broken. Oh my goodness, jealousy galore, insecurities galore.
Right.
You have attachment wounds. Oh my goodness, it's going to be raw and exposed, and you're not going to
Right.
like it. So polyamory is not a band-aid. It resonates with you. It's an extension of the way that you want to show up in
Mm-hmm.
relationships. So you've already decided, and so that needs to be talked about. And everybody gets a say. What are your boundaries around your
Mm-hmm.
children, around your partner's partner? What do they call your partner's partner? How do you introduce? So these things need to be decided. And if you can't agree, if you can't, and it's not, and oh, there's so many nuanced pieces to this, but if both of you can't arrive at a safe place, healthy place when it comes to the children, no one should be acting. That it's time to recruit some help. It's time to bring a
Mm-hmm.
therapist in. And then from there, and I think this is the most important, what you say you must follow through on. Not meaning like, I want my partner's partner to meet my kids, and then that you have to keep it that way for the rest of your life, even if you feel uncomfortable. A lot of the polyamory world and the experience is that you have to let things unfold, and then you use that information to inform you,
Mm-hmm.
is this something that I'm willing to continue with or not? Consent today does not automatically mean that I will consent for the rest of my life. It is not a like
Like a
a
carte blanche.
lifetime
Mm-hmm.
contract. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So if what we're doing now, it doesn't fit our children, is giving us feedback, and also listen to your kids if they are not ready, if they're saying I don't want this, I want mom and dad. Well, I mean, everybody needs to be listening, and then we establish
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. So I think that decisions needs to be made long before you even go down that. Do not let your kids be the teachers of it, all of it, because that's not fair to your children. But then when they receive that, because you've considered it, you've thought about it, everything is in place, and your child is saying, I'm not ready for this, or I don't feel comfortable, don't rush it. let that moment pass. I think that also I also kind of want to borrow from like blended families too. I think that there's a lot of work within blended families. Like the step parent role, like what can they say, what can they do? Dare I say we can borrow a lot of the kind of the parenting strategies within that. So we're not completely reinventing the wheel, but I truly believe that if you're not having the discussion and it's so clear and decided, do not bring your children into that mess. Your kids should not be the ones discovering
Right.
everything and then telling you need to be stepping in. I hope that starts the conversation for a lot of your
Yeah.
viewers if they're interested in
Yeah.
it.
I'm excited. Well, this is so good because I think like, this is like one of those things. And as a parent, I could relate, or I understand sometimes that fear is like, oh, I want to do something for myself, but I will stop if that means, it's going to affect my child in a way that I don't, I am unsure of, or has been stigmatized or whatever. And also I have seen this modeled, right? Just within my own family. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, you guys, didn't want a divorce or didn't want this because people didn't, will look at us differently or something. And then so they stayed together, which was not to anyone, it didn't do anybody any favor. And so at the end of the day is that how can we be brave and be authentic and live our truest self? Um, because at the end of the day, I feel like that's what everybody needs to have a model of, so they can be true to themselves, right?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, they dare
Hmm.
to go after what they wanted and they were happy. So I'm allowed to be happy, whatever that means.
I mean, I think that kids are so resilient, and kids will give you so many chances as
Hmm.
parents to try again. Like they're probably one of the most compassionate
Hmm.
beings without
I
even
know.
trying, because like say for instance, and every parent has had this moment where they were at their wits end, they're tired, they snap at their child, says something really harshly, and you come back and say, I'm so sorry. My goodness, they're like, pudding. They're like, oh, it's
Yeah.
okay, mommy, And so I truly, a healthy child is, really thriving when they have a parent who is living authentically, living openly, and is genuinely happy, because when a parent is happy, it naturally flows down to their child. And so relationship structures, whether it be a traditional or non-traditional relationship, there is a lot, there's going to be seasons where it's not the best, but staying together just for to keep the family together actually creates more distance. No one's actually solving anything, and the kid is stuck. Like there's nowhere
That
to
is so
go.
true.
They can't leave that
Yeah.
home. And so they're like, okay, well, I get. And guess what, this is where a lot of the maladapting coping
Mhm.
mechanism, like withdrawing, isolating, avoiding, all of those things starts to happen, because there's nowhere to go in a home that's rifled with conflict, with by two adults who's refusing to leave each other, who's unwilling to work through that.
Oh no. Like I'm like, yep, that sounds about right. You just diagnosed me. Um, pretty much. Oh my God.
I felt that way with my own, parents. I'm like, I would be so much happier if y'all would just break
Hmm.
up. Because man, it would have, I would have at least gotten an opportunity to see two people be
There you
happy.
go.
Like that's another thing. You're giving your kids the opportunity to see this part of you. And conflict in a romantic relationship can last for a very long time, because you genuinely want to see if it works. But there's a moment when the relationship is past their expiration date, and some of your viewers know it, like, oh, I stayed way too long.
Yeah.
And if your child was a part of that, when they see that finally the difficult is, the difficult part, which is the family looks different, how we operate in the family looks different by mom and dad is broken up. But when they see mom and dad happy, relaxed, oh my goodness, that changes the way that your child's nervous system
Yeah.
responds.
Yeah. Relationships. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
we're a social animal. So I guess just try and figure things out.
You're-
Yeah. This is so fun.
I had a really good time talking
I
about this. I
know.
mean, there's
There's
so
so many
many,
things. I know this is
there's
so
so
interesting. I
many.
can know he's like, oh,
Same. Rita, thank you so much. Thank you so much for just taking a risk.
no, this is so fun.
Just
No
learning
risk.
about me. I
What are you
appreciate
talking?
it. Yes.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thanks.